Welcome to what I consider season 2 of this little therapy session in review format. I took a little break to deal with some mental and physical health issues, but now I'm looking to get back into this and do it right. And sometimes doing it right means making up for some past mistakes. And I'll go into more detail into all of that as the episodes go on, but I want to address mistake number 1. When I first made this video, it was instantly claimed under copyright, and I fought that claim up to the point that my channel got a strike. I decided to ignore it and move on to the next one, and I'd circle back around if I ever had the time. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I had the time. I always have the time. I just never did it. So now, in light of this new beginning, I'm going to make the time. The Werewolf Game Prison Break is, unfortunately, my least liked of the entire series so far. It pains me to say that because there's some really neat stuff in it that falls into the shadow of this very weird subplot that unfortunately never even gets paid off. For those of you who don't know, The Werewolf Game is a series of movies that feature a different group of students trapped by a mysterious organization into different buildings and forced to play a game of werewolf where the results are death. If you don't know, Werewolf is a social deduction game where the players are given roles ranging from the villager, who has no special talents, the seer, who can see the roles of another player every night, necromancers, who can see the role of the last person who was voted off, but only if they were a werewolf or villager, and bodyguards, who can protect one person every night but can never protect themselves. And of course, the titular werewolves, who must pick one player every night to kill until there are equal numbers werewolves or villagers, or the villagers kill the werewolves. How do they do that? Well, the villagers do not take being picked off lying down. Every night they gather together to have a vote on who they believe is the werewolf, and once agreed upon, the chosen player is then executed. If you chose this as your starting point, your kind of entry into the Werewolf Game series, then I'm sorry, and buckle up because we're about to go on a ride. We start somewhere unusual for this series, outside, but also in the past. We come across a boy seeming to be soaking wet as he walks home from school after being bullied, while another young girl looks on at a distance. We're then snapped to our familiar setting as our heroine for this game, Inui Ikari, is awakened by panic screaming from another player who seems to have been in a relationship with a member of those up above and was abandoned to play in the game. The TV then begins to explain the rules of the game. If you're new, I gave a very brief and general overview earlier, so you can go back and check that out. And if you're not new, then all you need to know are the new rules introduced for this game: the partners and the madman. The partners seems rather mundane, honestly. Each partner knows who the other one is, and they both know that they're both villagers, which I can see some potential in, but it's nothing too impactful to the overall plot. But the madman is labeled and plays as a villager, but can only win if the werewolves do, which is an interesting mechanic on its face, and we'll see how it plays out in the film. We then have our now, and hopefully from now on, customary introduction of all our players. But there's only really a few we need to focus on for the overarching plot here. Soma Aoi, who seems to have a relationship with Akari, and Takeo and Masatoshi Mariyama, who are the only brothers I've ever seen placed together into a game this entire series. For reasons that will become apparent later, I've angrily dubbed these three the Me Too crew. We will also get to meet Akutsu Yuki, who is hands down my favorite player in the entire series of films so far, and luckily claims to be the prophet immediately. Takeo Mariyama then claims to be one of the partners, and then they disperse to prepare for the vote that night. And I have to give credit to this movie specifically for actually explaining the logic and tactics of that first discussion in a pretty clear and smart way. That being said, we then jump to the first vote. Like all first votes, this one is absolute nonsense, as there's no information, which they can even say outright, until Soma is accused and is unable to mount a defense, but it seems to be more a product of social anxiety than guilt in any way. Masatoshi, however, brings interest to Kaito for bringing up the prophet, When Kaito grows accusatory in his defense, Takeo steps up to defend his brother and the vote is called. Kaito is the victim of the first vote, and his caller chokes him out in front of everybody. Not my favorite method of execution, but the one they've chosen to go with. We then return to something that I really disliked about the first one, in that we do not get to see who the werewolves are or hear them discuss their strategies or anything like that. We just get to see them attack their first victim, and we do see that it is a fight. There's a real struggle to it. They can use the violence of the kill in order to figure out that there's still 3 werewolves remaining among them, meaning that the vote last night was meaningless. We then continue a theme of Akutsu being the only one comfortable enough to eat and drink regularly throughout the game, and he declares a villager, but when they ask for the necromancer to make their claim, nobody speaks up, meaning that they're probably dead. Akutsu makes a solid point that due to him being the prophet and Takeo a partner, they've greatly reduced the possible werewolves before they break for the day. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is where my umbrage with this movie begins. The starting point of the very stupid plot that will overshadow the rest of the actual werewolf game. When Soma meets with Akari in the kitchen to discuss their childhood relationship, and Akari offers to make it up to him somehow, Soma immediately attacks her, attempting to initiate sex. All the girls get together to discuss this issue, and it's revealed that Soma and the 2 brothers, who you may now be understanding why I call them the Me Too crew, approached another girl in the night because the younger brother had an interest in her, and warned her that if she didn't reciprocate, then they had 3 votes between them, and then left the room with her and Takeo alone. However, when they confront them, Masatoshi actually levies a pretty solid defense of Takeo and Soma, but they are unable to defend themselves when confronted personally, but they manage to separate without any major conflicts. There's literally an entire conversation following this about how Akari rationalizes his assault on her. And I want to be perfectly clear that I'm not trying to downplay the seriousness of the incident or the crime that was committed, but this is going to sound messed up, but I come here to watch kids play werewolf to the death, alright? I just want kids to kill each other, not fucking this. It does lead to Soma and Akari locating a blind spot in the cameras, and they concoct a plan to use it to cut off their collars. At the vote, they try to use the accusations as a basis to vote them off as werewolves. But Akari argues that the werewolf role doesn't make you a bad person, and Takeo reveals that Katone is his partner, and thus they both cannot be werewolves. Masatoshi also uses this opportunity to claim that he is actually the prophet, and accuses Nanami of being a werewolf, which he argues is bullshit since she's the one who led the female stance against the Me Too crew until time runs out and she's voted off. Once again, we get to see nothing as the werewolves pick their next victim. Katone, the other partner, and Takeo's crush, is killed in the night. Akutsu then labels Akari as a villager, as Masatoshi labels Mizuki as a villager, who then conveniently, big air quotes, reveals herself to be the necromancer and support Masatoshi's accusation from the last vote. We then start to notice that he's developed a small majority for himself, and that they have a potential death grip on the rest of the game. They disperse, and Akari finds a file to remove their collars with. And they begin when they're discovered by Masatoshi, who then demands to have his collar removed first, but before they could start on his, we jump to the vote, where he accuses Akutsu of being a fraud, but Akutsu manages to deflect the vote onto Seino, who is seen talking to Nanami, and he's voted out. After the vote, Akari begins work on Masatoshi's collar, and the werewolves must claim their next victim. But when they try to attack Akari, the door doesn't open. The next day, Mitsuku claims that Seino was a villager. Akatsu accuses Soma, and Masatoshi accuses Nagisa. The unfortunate reality that nobody else has noticed is that the Me Too crew featuring Mizuki are now the majority, and thus capable of swaying any vote any way that they want to. Akari does finally free Masatoshi, and he seems to finally realize his position of power as he breaks into full insane laughter in the kitchen. So how, dear viewers, will Akari and Akutsu overcome the now unstoppable Masatoshi and his squad? Well, the night of the vote, he doesn't appear for the vote, and Takeo seems to panic when the players are alerted to noise outside, and Masatoshi, I shit you not, runs out into the street, turns to stare at an oncoming vehicle, assumes the universal come at me bro pose, and is literally isekai'd out of the film. Takeo has a full-on breakdown after the death of his brother, but manages to convince them to vote for Nagisa anyway. I'm not kidding, by the way. That's the end of Masatoshi. The whole situation that he perfectly laid out to make himself both the leader of the majority and literally unkillable in any vote led up to that entire anticlimax. I will do my best to continue to explain this movie, but man. Mizuki is killed in the night, and the werewolf that we still haven't seen continues to stab her long after she dies. Takeo continues to have his freak out when they find her body, but without his brother to protect him, he just seems like kind of a dick. Akari then reveals that she's always been the kind of person who just does what it takes to fit in and not be bullied, including pouring water on Soma when they were kids. I don't know why they're trying to demonize her or redeem Soma with this conversation, but we eventually do get to the vote. Akutsu argues that Soma is the only one left that can be voted out, but Akari counters by saying that she's a madman and will vote for Takeo. If the werewolf votes for him with her, then they will certainly win. Takeo votes for Soma votes for Akutsu, and Akutsu reveals that he's the werewolf by voting for Takeo. Akutsu fucking killed this game, by the way. He deserved that win, and I hate that this bullshit rule is about to take place. Akari refuses to vote, which is against the rules, so she's executing, letting the remaining two, both accused and one confirmed attempted rapists, by the way, win by voting out Akutsu. The TV congratulates them, but informs them that this is only the first round, and they'll be taken to the second round soon, before they're choked into unconsciousness. In his last moments, Soma gets to see Akari's card, but I don't know what this symbol is, so I don't know what role she had. It's revealed that Akari had removed her collar, and then removed Soma's before learning that he was the bodyguard. Takeo is then killed because Akari and Soma cheated, and it then seems that the higher-ups don't have any other methods of execution, as Akari and Soma just kind of stand there, staring at the screen. They then escape the building and begin to run, first together. Then, as we go back to see the same message on the TV, Soma begins to slow down and fall behind as Akari leaves him behind. We cut to black. I still, having seen this movie several times, in the initial viewing, the writing of the original script, the first edit, the rewriting of this script, the re-edit of this video, have seen this movie. I've seen it so many times, and I still do not like it. It's not just the assault thing, although that's part of it. It's just that there's so much that goes nowhere in it. Masatoshi builds a flawless position of power, seemingly made entirely out of villagers. And it falls apart because he chooses to run out into the street and stare down a truck? Mizuki had a relationship with one of the people higher up and reveals less than we'll find out from the players in The Lovers. The return of not knowing the werewolf's plans or even who they are from villagers' side is back and makes it impossible to know what plays are working and what aren't until the end. And then you have to go back and rewatch it, guessing at important roles and trying to figure out what was going on. As far as movies goes, it's still fine, but in the pantheon of werewolf movies, definitely the lowest of them all so far. Watch it if you want to complete the series, like I did, but otherwise, please just pass on this one. I'm sorry this review was so negative, especially since it was my first one back after so long, and I promise to be more positive in the future, but I don't like this movie. So, for all of season 1, I had kind of a hidden call to action here. I always said the like, comment, and subscribe thing. Even though I was saying that you didn't have to, it was still just a subconscious call to action. Well, fuck that, you know? From now on, just know that so long as you support others' hopes and dreams, then you're still a friend to me. I love you all. Good night. So if you stuck around for this, thank you very much. The last month, I dealt with some health issues and some mental health issues, including a serious case of imposter syndrome. I didn't feel like I deserved any of the views or the likes that I had gotten, that you all deserved better than what I was making And that fear honestly kept me from making anything at all. And then comments came in asking when the series was coming back, and others that were just so kind that I can't even begin to describe them. Like, I'm not big enough to get bombarded by hate comments. And trust me, I do that to myself enough for most of YouTube, believe me. But knowing that people were out there who cared about what I was saying, who genuinely liked what I was doing, that put an end to anything that could have held me back. So I'm back, and I'm going to stay back, and I'm going to keep improving. For all of you who have supported me, and anyone who finds me in the future, thank you. Honestly, I love you all. I'll see you soon. And there are voices all